Well, happy Pride, everybody. Welcome to our special live Q&A of the Summerland screening. And my name is Peter Stein. I'm senior programmer for Frameline. I'm coming to you live from San Francisco and thrilled that you are here to join us. I hope you've enjoyed this beautiful film, and we've got an extraordinary cast and director to join us today. I want to first of all thank IFC for making this film possible for us here at the Frameline44 Pride Showcase, and also a big thanks to Pilar, who is doing ASL interpretation for us. Well, I'm here in San Francisco, but this film, of course, is a British production. It is written and directed by our guest, coming to us live from London. I want to welcome Jessica Swale, who will be popping in shortly to join us. There's
Hi,
Jessica.
Everybody. Hello, and thank you so much for having us, Peter. It's a real privilege to be here.
It's a delight to have you. Also joining us from London is the actor, star of Summerland, who you will know from everything from Bond films to she played the Vita Sackville West in our opening night film last year, Vita and Virginia. Please welcome Gemma Arterton.
Hello.
Great to have you here. Hi, Gemma.
Great to be here. Thank you.
And the wonderful character of Vera, who your love interest, Gemma, in Summerland, is the actress Gugu Mbata-Raw, who's joining us today from Los Angeles. Welcome, Gugu.
Hi.
It's great to have you here. I understand this may be one of the first kind of virtual Q&A talkbacks that you all are doing for this film. So we're thrilled to be able to engender a reunion for you all.
Well, we're very pleased to be here and to be celebrating Pride with everybody as well. So happy Pride, audience.
Happy Pride. I want to start with you, Jessica. This is an original story authored by you. And I want to know what inspired you to create the world of Alice and Vera and the young boy, Frank. How did these characters arise for you? And also, how did the setting come to be?
Well, it was quite an unusual process, Peter, because usually as a writer, I start with an idea which has been drilling away for a long time, or something I feel very compelled to write about, often something that's based on reality or someone I've met or something I've noticed. But this film was actually different, and it's the first time I've ever started truly with a blank page and nothing as a sort of kernel, because I wrote it when I was given a scholarship at BAFTA. They were looking for writers who they wanted to encourage over into film, and I was a theatre writer at the time. And the challenge on that year at BAFTA, where we were asked to write a screenplay, was that we weren't allowed to come with an idea already. We had to start from scratch, and we had to answer the question, if you had nothing on your page, then what are the things that you would be really excited about writing about? What do you love to see? What do you want to see more of? What would you do if you could do absolutely anything? And for me, I thought, well, I love writing about underdogs for a start. I like writing about, I don't want to write about the popular successful person. I want to write about the outsider. I love writing for women. I love writing naive characters. So I like to write children. I like to write characters that have a big journey to go on. But I think more than anything, I really want to tell stories about heart and about humanity, and about how we need to always have hope in adversity. And the story really came from that. The idea of how a child's perspective and a child's sort of innocence and open-mindedness could actually really get us somewhere at a time when I was feeling, particularly because of Brexit and the sort of nationalism which seemed to be sweeping around the world, the notion that we need to be kinder, we need to be more open-minded, and I really believe that everybody should be able to be who they want, whether that's to do with class or race or sexuality, any of those parameters. So those were the sort of nubs, but then I also wanted to write something about folklore and the idea of Englishness, which I found sort of both intriguing and a bit embarrassing and confusing at that moment when I was writing. And I love to see women doing real things. You know, I like the idea of Alice being a writer and a scientist as well. And of course, I love to write about magic.
Well, so into this incredible stew of pagan folklore and Englishness and strong women, you have created this amazing character of Alice, who is independent and fierce and prickly and not always likable. And so, Gemma, you came into the project early on. Was it with a mind because of playing Alice, or what attracted you to the project to kind of sign on early and say, let's make this movie?
Well, Jess and I worked together on a play, and afterwards I said to her, so I've heard about this film, Summerland. Somebody had just told me about this film, Summerland. Can you send it to me? And it was more as a producer than an actress. Summerland was originally written, Alice was written a lot older, not a lot older, but a bit older. And so I read it and just didn't even think about playing Alice at all. But I loved the script. I thought it was outstanding and beautiful and totally unexpected. And so then I said to Jess, "Well, let's make it, and you can direct it." And then she said, "Well, do you want to play Alice?" And I thought, "Whoa," you know, because it's quite a departure for me as well, in terms of the type of role and the character. And then we ended up sort of reworking it a little bit to kind of accommodate my age. And so, yeah, it wasn't. It was the story itself that enthralled me, and then the character thing just came to me to us both. But yeah, it was the whole thing really, and that's often how I feel now when I choose roles. I'm less interested in the role. I'm more interested in the whole piece and what it is about, and being involved in a piece rather than just the character thing.
Well, clearly your connection to it helped enable the film to come to life. Jessica has had a little bit of a technical problem, and she will be back with us. But and it's not that she quit in a huff, but after what you said, Gemma. But in the meanwhile, I want to turn to Gugu. The love story of Alice and Vera is so vibrant, it's so passionate, but it's also really unusual in films in depicting a 1920s lesbian love affair, and particularly the kind of heartbreak that happens when somebody is forced to choose between motherhood and love. And so I'm wondering how, in reading the script and maybe in working with Jessica and with Gemma, how you came to understand who Vera is, and did you give her a backstory of any kind?
Yes, well, I've worked with Jess before. Me and Gemma worked with Jess on a play, Nell Gwyn, back in London, different productions, and I very much knew Jess's spirit, and as she was so eloquently saying earlier, you know, her sense of heart, I think, in everything that she does is very strong. And I remember Jess actually just explaining or picturing the story of Summerland, and again, like you, Gemma, I didn't really think about myself being in it. I just thought it was such a unique story. I thought it was incredibly original, and I loved the fact that the idea of motherhood in a period drama and in you know, the choices to become a mother in a lesbian story and also in a period drama. I'd just never seen that before. I just thought it was incredibly refreshing, and Vera was just so vibrant. I just, you know, the way that she appears in the story, you know, there's a mystique around her, but I also just thought she was just such a fun and vivacious character, and the story was just so moving and emotional. And you know, the chance obviously to work with Jess on her film debut as a writer director was just, you know, such an incredible incredible opportunity.
Well, I'm glad you brought that up, and welcome back, Jessica. Sorry for the little technical blip there. Your cast was very kind about you behind your back.
Oh, well, I've got no idea what you just said. So it could be.
But Gugu mentioned, and it's a bit astonishing. This is actually your feature film directing debut. You were a very accomplished theater director, and obviously a very talented playwright and screenwriter. But I'm kind of amazed that for your first directorial effort, you set yourself the challenge of doing not just a period piece, but a piece that is set actually in 3 distinct time periods. Because
I mean, who would do that?
Yeah. So, were you advised to make it a little easier on yourself, or what did you find to be the biggest challenge as a first-time director?
Do you know, actually, those 3 different time periods didn't make the film any harder to make. Because actually, for example, with an element of budget, which is tricky as a first-time director, most sort of awards and schemes, for example, that are set up to support people who are making their first film, the top budget allowed for a film to be eligible is something like often 10 or 20 or $50,000, and this film was a sort of full-sized feature. And I remember thinking early on, this film will be much easier to make if we can compromise, if we can pull back and simplify. So, for example, particularly if we cut London or if we cut all the underwater, and there were questions about those things more than cutting the time periods. But I felt really strongly that if you're going to tell a story, you have to tell it the way it was meant to be told. And in the same way as when I started writing plays for the theatre, I think most writers very sensibly write 2 or 3-handers, you know, 1 scene, 1 room, 2 people in a kitchen. It doesn't cost anything to put on a production like that. And the first play I wrote is for 20 people. But that's because for me, I always want to sort of follow the instinct of the story. And it felt like it would be doing a disservice to the characters not to allow them their full story. I didn't want to do a smaller version, and particularly with the time periods, I feel like it's really important actually to show that gay relationships, when I'd seen them in film, often I felt like it might be, you know, you can sort of celebrate young love and these 2 people who are together for that moment in their lives, and you just see them when they're in their 20s and think, but will that relationship stand the test of time? And I do think it's unusual to see 2 women on screen together as lovers throughout their whole lives. And I felt like that was a really important statement to make. And I also wanted to say something about the way that love affects us or doesn't affect us. And that, you know, women have as diverse personalities as men, and actually to see a woman who's quite cranky sometimes and very focused in what she does, to think, oh, she's not transformed by love. It's not like she's moody at the beginning and then Vera comes back in and she meets Frank and suddenly she becomes light and fiery and, you know, floats around like an angel. No, she's a writer. She's still a moody old cow like I am. I mean, hello, she's based on me partly. But, you know, if I'm in the middle of writing something and someone disturbs me, I've never stolen a child's candy bar, but I would. You know, and I really wanted to show that love doesn't, you know, you can have love in your life, but it doesn't change your personality.
Gemma, could you address the idea of playing a character who at times is kind of awful? I mean, did you feel you had to kind of out-charm the script, or did you just lean into it and say, no, I'm just going to trust Jess that this character is going to ultimately win our hearts, or at least our sympathies?
Yeah, I think that was something I always am dismayed when I hear that line, unlikable, because I like watching unlikable people on screen. I don't know why. And as Jess said, she's an underdog, but it was always apparent in the script that, I mean, you know, she softens with Frank, and she changes throughout the course of the story, and that you earn that only by being as cantankerous and horrible as possible at the beginning. So I relished in as much as I could being a complete cow. I
would say that, Jem, because every time everybody says, "Oh, isn't she so awful?" and I think, I think she's quite reasonable. Is it only me? I mean, obviously, you write it.
That girl is really annoying in the shop.
Yeah, the girl is whiny, frustrating, and deserves to be told what's what. And she's hogging the shop and getting all the attention. Oh, yeah. I want a chocolate bar. I want a chocolate bar. Please, can I have a chocolate bar? It's just think, of course, like, you know.
I also think it's that thing of women, you know, we're not used to, or women are not allowed to be unlikable. You know, I think if it was a male character, you know, we would be so accustomed. We'd be like, oh, that's just who they are. That's just how they are. You make those excuses. And I think I love the fact that both Jess and Gemma challenge that expectation of women to be maternal and likable, and actually, I think it's so refreshing, and as I say, it's just great because men are allowed to be unlikable in movies all the time, and you know, they don't have to be charming and sweet. They can go on a real journey, a real human journey, and I think that that's the great thing about how Gemma played the character as well. Is she's not just trying to be appealing, you know, for the audience. She's being a real person.
Great, wonderful points, and I apologize as I believe the only male appearing on the screen if I implied that therefore, you know, that the character of Alice should have been softer. I loved her prickliness, and I loved the fact that all of you, you know, gave your characters leeways to be fully fleshed out. A quick note to our audience: if you're watching live, please feel free to type in some questions on whatever platform you're using, and we'll get to as many as we can in the time remaining that we have with our guests. One of the real strong points of the film is something and somebody we haven't talked about yet, and that is the young actor who played Frank. It's really quite a revelatory performance. Tell us a little bit, Jess, about how you found Lucas Bond. Who is he? Really quite extraordinary performance that you achieved with him.
Lucas is a legend. I mean, he's one of, you know, people say don't work with children, but I would work with him over a lot of, you know, a lot of other people in a heartbeat, because he's really wonderful. He's really generous. He's really intelligent. And it was really fantastic watching his relationship develop with Gemma as well. And Gem, you taught him a great deal. Actually, it was lovely because obviously as the director, you're trying to guide someone, and we had some rehearsal time. But actually, you know, you're working all the time on the next shot, the next shot, the next shot. And so you do rely on actors between themselves to form relationships. And one of the most joyous things about this film was watching, as he had his more complicated scenes later on in the shooting schedule, how when he had some really moving things to do, like the day he finds out that his dad's dead, he was using Gemma's techniques that she uses on set to sort of get himself in the mode. And it was the only day that Gemma wasn't working. She's in every single scene except for that one. And I thought you would have been really proud, Gem, to see how he was sort of using things that he'd obviously observed you doing, and also I know you talked about. So he was an absolute sort of sponge, because he's done a little bit of work before, but this is his first major film.
So without revealing too many trade secrets, Gemma, can you share a little bit of what was it? This preparation or getting yourself into a zone to play an emotional scene?
I think it was the getting into the zone thing, or the focus. Maybe I can't remember. Maybe it's breathing as well, because I sometimes use breathing to get me into a state. Yeah. And I think he was doing a bit of that, was he? And,
yeah, he was. Yeah.
And and he was. I remember you saying he was really, you know, take himself off and he'd really concentrate.
Yeah. Never want to go. Where's Lucas? Okay.
So here's a question from one of our viewers. It's for Jessica. How did you decide to cast other actors for the older versions of the two leads, many filmmakers would probably have aged Gemma and Gugu with makeup. Of course, you did get the chance then to work with the wonderful Penelope Wilton, but tell us a little bit about whether you thought about aging the two actors who are with us today.
Yeah, well, I mean, the two actors already played two significantly different time periods, the 20s and the, you know, and the war years, and I thought that it was very important that they played themselves in those two times, and actually their looks, in terms of makeup, wigs, etc., were quite significantly different to show the passage of time between those two. But asking the same two actors to play a good sort of 30 years or so on, I just thought I don't want anyone to be distracted at that point in the story by wigs and makeup and fake wrinkles, and it's so difficult to do well and it's so expensive. And I also think there's something quite magical and transformative and oddly sort of opening up of the story to bring different actors in, because of course they're the same characters, but it's almost, for me, there's a sort of liminal space in between the two versions of that character, Penelope and Gemma, where you think, well, now it could almost be anybody's story. We know it's Alice and Vera and Frank, but it also feels to me like somehow it slightly represents more people. And there's something important about saying this isn't just a story about love in this one instance. This could be you, or it could be you, or it could be anybody.
Yeah, I agree. I didn't know where the story was going to go with regard to the you know, casting it into the future, but I was quite happy to see in a way a different face, because it allowed you to say, oh, this woman Alice and the character Vera have had other lives that and we're all transformed, even physically in a way, by the experience that we've had. So I thought it did kind of open it out.
Yeah.
There's another question here that from a viewer that is, it's open-ended in a way, but it's really quite timely, which is it gets to the meaning of this film being released in this moment that we're in, at least in the States, with activism for racial justice, and also during a pandemic. You could not have known the situation of the world when you made the film, but you've chosen to feature an unusual romance, not just between two women, but it's implied, although never really fully explicated, that it's an interracial love story and relationship. So I'm wondering what it means, and our viewer is wondering what it means to be having the film come out into the world at this moment.
Well, I'm. Those are issues that I think we have lived with for a long time as filmmakers and citizens of the world. They're issues that I felt really strongly about when we shot the film 2 years ago, and when I wrote it 2 years before that, and I still feel are absolutely central now. So in a way, it's very timely, because these issues have flared up. But at the same time, I think, well, I hope this proves that lots of people think about these things all the time, and we've known they're important for a long time. And this is, you know, one issue right now is having a particular moment. Actually, when we were shooting, it was in the middle of Time's Up and the Me Too movement, and it felt like there was a particular focus right at that point on women and equality. So I'm pleased that it speaks to the dialogue that's going on at the moment, because I feel like that's vital. And I think the more films that there are that address issues of equality, and particularly with the Black Lives Matter movement at the moment, to have a film where you've got diversity within the casting, in that we've got two people of colour out of the three lead roles, is what I think cinema should be, quite frankly. And so I don't think it's something we should be proud of so much as something that everybody ought to be doing. But I think the other thing to say is that in terms of both sexuality and in terms of race in Summerland, this is a story that I wrote because it's a story about humanity, and actually the issue of race is never addressed directly in the story, because this is a story about two people, and it's not about it's not about who they are any more than in terms of their personalities. And yes, they're both women, but I didn't want to make a story that was about how difficult it is to be gay. I wanted to write a story about how the two women in this story, rather than it being their sexuality which makes their relationship difficult, to set a film with two women falling in love and then being forced apart at that point in history, and not have it because it's so hard to be gay, but have it because they actually want different things. That felt to me much more like the stories of my friends who are in gay relationships, where actually the troubles that they have are the same troubles as a straight couple might have. And I think, you know, the reason for casting Googs, for example, was nothing to do with skin color. It's all to do with the fact that Vera is a character who Quiet Alice meets, who is such a whirlwind. She has an absolutely sort of like crashing relationship, because she's a whirlwind and she's full of energy and she's exciting, and she literally topples over this woman who's never met anybody like her. And so I thought of Gugu for the role because that's exactly what I thought she would bring to it. And I think it's really important that we cast actors because they're great actors, not necessarily for other reasons. Although, of course, at the moment, it's really important that we do make sure that the people that we see on our screens represent the people that we see in our communities.
Right. And for either Gemma or Gugu or both, you know, Frameline, our festival here, is celebrating 44 years, and we're still getting used to the idea of top-line actors like yourselves who are doing everything from indie films like Motherless Brooklyn, which I wanted to congratulate you on, Gugu. That was a beautiful film from Edward Norton, and Bond films and everything else that Gemma's been in. We're still happy as LGBTQ audiences to see top-line actors taking queer parts. And I'm wondering, is the stigma gone? Is there still any lingering question from either yourselves or your colleagues or your agents to say, well, you know, be careful how many of these roles you take? I'm really curious about that.
Well, I guess I've never really been aware of a stigma. It's never really crossed my mind in that way. I think if it's a great story, if it moves me, if I love the character, it's never been an issue for me. If it's a story and a role I want to play, then
I'm thrilled to hear that. I'm thrilled to stand corrected. What about for you, Gemma?
I know it's there for some people, but it hasn't been a conversation for me in that way. I'm drawn to roles and characters for very different reasons, and something like that's not going to stand in the way of me having a wonderful artistic experience.
I feel the same. I mean, Summerland is my second part of my gay trilogy. The third is I'm playing Dusty Springfield in something later. Yeah, I don't know. I grew up with a lot of gay people in my life. My aunt's gay and she helped raise me, and it's just never been a thing, a separateness thing for me. And I don't feel that in when I'm choosing roles. I feel the same. I just choose the story that I like, and you know, it all depends on the filmmaker and the story and the character. But it's never like, oh, I better not do another gay film because then everyone will think I'm gay or whatever. You know, it's just not. You know, it's just not that. But I'm sure that there is. Maybe that is a conversation that's had still by certain people, but it's just I've never had that.
That's great to hear.
On that very quickly, because I think that, I mean, it's funny how it affects actors, because obviously it's about how you're perceived, but it's also, I remember that being a conversation right at the beginning with BAFTA, where one of the other writers, a senior writer, said to me, well, you do know that, like, if you do this film, that you'll be seen as sort of standing up for gay rights, or you'll be seen as the gay filmmaker. And I said, well, I'm not gay, but why can't I tell a story about two people who were in love that happen to be gay? And I think that's changed. That was 5 years ago, and I really think already, I hope there's a sense that actually these stories should be so mainstream that it's not, there's two women in this film, therefore it is a gay film per se, which means it's somehow not part of a mainstream culture. And that was part of why I wanted to really fight for a good budget for this film and not make any of those compromises, because I think the more we see stories about every sort of love and about anybody being able to love anybody that they like, and about acceptance and about humanity per se, and stories which are racially and sexually and class-wise and diverse in all of those ways, that's the only way forward for cinema. And if we're going to survive a pandemic, we better come back with a little bit more open-mindedness as a community, I think.
Well, your film comes as a great tonic and a beautiful message in all of those ways, partly because of the amazing performances of your cast, partly because of your fierce imagination, Jess, for bringing these characters and breathing life into them. So we can't thank you here at Frameline enough for bringing Summerland to us. I know that IFC is excited to be distributing this starting on July 31st to drive-ins and select theaters, and on VOD for those who haven't had a chance to watch it yet at home. I can't wait for all of your next projects. Jess, Gemma, Gugu, thank you for joining us. Happy Pride to all of you, and thank you for your beautiful and heartfelt film.
Oh, thank you so much.
Thank you.